I was very shy. With strangers, I just couldn't talk to people. And I found if I had a drink, it loosened me up, the barriers went down, and I became very social. That's what got me started. And so it took me a long time to get over it. I get a lot of letters from people who say that all of a sudden they weren't ashamed to admit they had a drinking problem, and they got help. So I'm very proud of that. I was able to help people.
Dick Van Dyke almost died 3 times in the last decade. Once in a burning car, once crawling on the ground during wildfires. But each time, something incredible happened. At 99, he's married to a woman young enough to be his granddaughter. He's still working out harder than most 30-year-olds. And he just revealed his secret plan for turning 100. What he's doing at almost 100 years old is so shocking, even his closest friends can't believe it. Dick Van Dyke was born on December 13, 1925, in a tiny town called West Plains, Missouri. His mother, Hazel, worked as a stenographer, and his father, Loren, sold things door to door. They didn't have much. Back then, Loren earned about $26 a week, which would be around $400 today. The town had fewer than 5,000 people, and times were tough. But something about that small-town life stuck with Dick forever. It gave him a simple charm and strong work ethic that never left, even when he later became one of the biggest names in Hollywood. Later, the family moved to Danville, Illinois. That's where things got interesting. During high school in the late 1930s and early 1940s, Dick ended up surrounded by future stars. Donald O'Connor, who would later dance in Singin' in the Rain, went to school with him. So did Bobby Short, who would become a famous singer in New York. And one of his best friends was the cousin of Gene Hackman. In a class of just under 200 students, at least 3 would go on to become national celebrities. That kind of chance is incredibly rare, but for Dick, it planted the idea that maybe he could do something big too. Before he ever stepped on stage, Dick thought he was going to become a minister. His mother made sure they never missed Sunday church. At 15, he even gave a sermon. He liked the idea of lifting people's spirits. He once said he wanted to bring joy to others the way his pastor did every week. But then came school plays. Once he started acting, everything shifted. A drama teacher encouraged him to perform, and the idea of becoming a minister slowly faded. The world came very close to never seeing him sing and dance on screen. Something else nearly kept him from performing. When he was 16, doctors told him he had a heart murmur. That meant no running, no football, no sports at all. It was heartbreaking news. But since he couldn't play sports, he joined drama class instead. He got his first role that fall, and something just clicked. That applause gave him a feeling he never forgot. The condition that once felt like a curse turned out to be the reason he found the stage. Just 2 years later, in 1944, Dick made a decision that stunned everyone around him. He dropped out of high school and tried to join the military during World War II. But at 6'1" and only 130 pounds, he didn't meet the weight requirement. He tried 3 times and failed. The minimum was 141 pounds, so he ate bananas non-stop until he finally passed on the 4th try. Even then, he didn't see combat. Instead, he entertained troops on the home front. It didn't matter to him. He just wanted to help, and he wasn't going to give up. Once he was finally accepted, Dick dreamed of flying planes. But that dream ended quickly. He had an allergy that made combat impossible, and he didn't do well in drills. So they made him a radio announcer. The way he got the job was almost ridiculous. While using the latrine at a base in Sherman, Texas, an officer handed him a piece of paper and told him to read it. That was his audition. Just like that, he became the voice of a program called Flight Time. That moment in the bathroom, strange as it was, launched a career that would reach millions. Dick didn't stop at radio. He moved into the military's entertainment branch, performing in stage shows and building sets. He ran comedy programs, played music, and even made jokes over loudspeakers in the mess hall. These small, chaotic performances weren't glamorous, but they taught him how to think fast and stay confident. They also taught him how to connect with an audience, no matter where he was. Years later, those same skills would carry him through television and film. In 1946, after the war ended, Dick returned home. He was just 21 and took a job spinning records on WDAN, his local radio station. He cracked jokes, hosted contests, and played music for families all across town. It wasn't a big job, but it gave him a platform. People started to know his voice. He wasn't famous yet, but he was getting closer. Then came failure. Instead of going straight into show business, Dick tried to open an advertising agency in Danville. It didn't last. Within a year, the business collapsed. He lost money, he lost confidence. It could have ended everything. But that failure was a turning point. Feeling desperate, he teamed up with a friend named Phil Erickson to form a comedy duo. That one decision set him on the path to entertainment. Together, they became Eric and Van the Merry Mutes, an act that relied on mime, music, and comedy without a single spoken word. While everyone else chased punchlines, they lip-synced to old records and let body language steal the laughs. They started in West Coast nightclubs and stayed on the road for over 5 years. That's around 2,000 nights of constant performing, constant traveling, and constant practice. They even made it onto early television in Atlanta, where mime acts were a rare sight. For Van Dyke, this stretch of time sharpened everything: his timing, his stamina, and his comfort with a live audience, long before anyone knew his name. On February 12, 1948, something unusual happened on live radio. Dick Van Dyke and his girlfriend, Marjorie Willett, got married in front of 15 million listeners. They were broke, and the national radio show Bride and Groom offered to pay for their wedding and honeymoon if they agreed to say their vows live. So they did. 2 microphones, a minister, and a room full of strangers made it official. It was an early glimpse into how entertainment and real life could mix on air. The marriage lasted 36 years and brought them 4 children. Long before reality shows made wedding drama into a business, Van Dyke and Willett lived through one of the earliest and most public moments of it. In the early 1950s, Van Dyke found himself in New Orleans, working at WDSU-TV Channel 6, the city's first television station. He didn't start big. He did everything from announcing to hosting music shows to comedy skits. He even filled airtime during the station's noon news. The station was a pioneer. It later became the first in the Deep South to broadcast in color. And Van Dyke was in the middle of it all, trying new material every week. It was a demanding job, but he learned fast. New Orleans audiences expected quick laughs and lively energy, and Van Dyke gave them both. Looking back, that job taught him how to survive live television. It prepared him for what came next. Then came 1954, and Van Dyke's first national television appearance on a talent show called Chance of a Lifetime. It aired on ABC and helped new performers get their start. Van Dyke's mime act, backed by comedy, impressed viewers and producers alike. He began landing guest roles on national variety shows like The Phil Silvers Show and The Pat Boone Chevy Showroom. It didn't take long for producers to notice that he could do more than just mime. In 5 years, he'd go from guest performer to Broadway star. That kind of rise wasn't common. Most comedians spent a decade trying to get there. Van Dyke made it look fast and easy, but behind it was years of silent practice and small gigs. In 1956, a friend from Van Dyke's Army days stepped in with an offer that changed everything. That friend was now an executive at CBS. He recommended Van Dyke to the network, and it worked. Van Dyke got a 7-year contract. That was rare. Networks didn't hand out long-term deals to comedians without proven national success. But Van Dyke had something different. He soon started co-hosting the CBS morning show. His co-host for the news segment was Walter Cronkite. The show didn't last long, but the opportunity did. That contract was the first real bet CBS made on Van Dyke, and it paid off. By late 1959, Van Dyke made it to Broadway. His first show, The Girls Against the Boys, opened in November and closed 2 weeks later, after only 16 performances. It could have been a disaster. The cast included big names like Bert Lahr and Shelley Berman, and Van Dyke played a few small roles. Most new actors would have been rattled by such a quick closing, but Van Dyke took it as a lesson. He saw how Broadway worked. He saw how quickly things could fall apart. And somehow, it didn't slow him down. Just 5 months later, in April 1960, he was back on Broadway. This time as the lead. He played Albert F. Peterson in a new musical called Bye Birdie. The story followed a pop star's sudden military draft, clearly inspired by Elvis Presley. Van Dyke was a risky choice. He had little stage experience, and many doubted whether he could carry a show. But he did. His energy, awkward charm, and timing made the role work. He went from a background player to leading man in less than half a year. That kind of leap didn't just happen. It had to be earned. By April 1961, Van Dyke won a Tony Award for Best Featured Actor in a Musical. He was 35. Just 2 years earlier, he'd been doing side roles in a show that barely made it out of previews. Now he was winning against seasoned Broadway veterans. The award wasn't just a personal victory. It proved he belonged on the biggest stages in the country. It proved that a former mime act from West Coast clubs could become a top-tier performer in the eyes of New York critics. The success of Bye Birdie was massive. The show ran for 607 performances before closing in October 1961. It won 4 Tony Awards, including Best Musical. Songs like Put on a Happy Face and One Last Kiss became radio hits. The musical didn't just entertain, it captured something real about American life, the teenage obsession with fame, music, and change. When Carl Reiner first created the idea for the Dick Van Dyke Show, he wasn't writing for someone else. He wrote it for himself. It was originally called Head of the Family, and in 1959, he filmed a pilot with him as the star. But the networks weren't impressed. The show didn't sell. Still, 2 legendary producers, Sheldon Leonard and Danny Thomas, believed in the script. They told Reiner to let someone else play the lead. Reiner wasn't thrilled, but he agreed. Leonard even said, "You won't fail. We'll get a better actor to play you." That actor turned out to be Dick Van Dyke. At the time, Van Dyke had never led a TV show. But once CBS aired the new version on October 3, 1961, everything changed. Van Dyke played Rob Petrie, a comedy writer based on Reiner's own life. The chemistry, the stories, the casting, it all worked. Reiner's show, which had nearly vanished, became a classic. Casting Mary Tyler Moore as Laura Petrie wasn't easy either. She was only 23 and barely known when she tried out. She had already faced rejection after rejection and almost skipped the audition. Even Van Dyke wasn't sure she could be funny. Her accent sounded too polished. But the moment they acted together, something clicked. She was quick, confident, and brought out the best in every scene. The two became so good together that the cast started working like an improv team. They could almost read each other's minds. Their performances felt natural, real, and full of energy. On the show, Rob and Laura became one of television's most beloved couples. Off-screen, there was no romance, just total focus on making each scene perfect. Later, they joked that not having an affair was a terrible waste, but it kept the on-screen magic intact. The audience and critics noticed. Dick Van Dyke won the Emmy for Outstanding Lead Actor in a comedy series 3 years in a row, 1964, 1965, and 1966. In those same years, the show itself won for Outstanding Comedy Series. This wasn't common. Sitcoms had tough competition, but Van Dyke's performance stood out. He was charming, fast, and funny, without ever overdoing it. The show had momentum, it kept winning, and it kept earning respect. In just 5 years, with only 158 episodes, the show won 15 Emmy Awards. It received 27 wins and 24 nominations overall across major awards. These were for writing, acting, and the series as a whole. Winning just 1 Emmy was a big deal at the time. This show won so many, it broke expectations. Years later, it was still being ranked among the best shows ever made by both TV Guide and the Writers Guild. Even after the final episode aired in June 1966, the show wasn't over. Reruns kept playing, and new generations discovered Rob and Laura Petrie. It became one of the first sitcoms to stay popular through syndication, running all the way into the 2000s. Van Dyke's performance left such a mark that even after he starred in Mary Poppins and Diagnosis, Murder, people still saw him as Rob Petrie first. The writing, the cast, and the balance between home and work stories helped make it a model for future sitcoms. It had a clear, heartfelt ending too. That gave the story even more weight and helped seal its legacy. While The Dick Van Dyke Show made him a household name, Van Dyke's first major movie came in 1963 with Bye Birdie. He had already played the role on Broadway and won a Tony Award, but the film brought it to a much bigger audience. It combined rock and roll with a fun look at fame, inspired by the time Elvis Presley was drafted into the Army. Van Dyke starred as Albert Peterson, and he shared the screen with Anne Margaret, who became a breakout star. She even earned a Golden Globe nomination. One song in particular, Put on a Happy Face, became one of Van Dyke's signature moments. Critics pointed out that his talent was even bigger than people had seen on TV. The movie proved he could carry musicals on the big screen too. Then came Mary Poppins in 1964. Van Dyke played not 1, but 2 roles. Everyone remembers him as Bert, the cheerful chimney sweep. But many didn't realize he also played the old bank manager, Mr. Dawes Sr. That role almost didn't happen. Walt Disney wasn't sure about the idea, so Van Dyke offered to pay $4,000 of his own money just for the chance. Under heavy makeup, he was nearly unrecognizable. In fact, the credits listed him as Nav's Kid Keed, an anagram of his real name. The trick worked. He earned a Golden Globe nomination and became part of one of the most loved family films ever made. Decades later, he returned in the sequel, this time as Mr. Dawes Jr. The Mary Poppins soundtrack also became a huge hit. In 1964 alone, it sold over 2.3 million copies. By 1968, it had passed 6 million. It spent 14 weeks at #1 on the Billboard album chart. That was rare, especially for a soundtrack aimed at children. It won the Grammy for Best Album for Children and became a part of daily life for families all over the world. Van Dyke sang in several unforgettable tracks like Chim Chim Cher-ee and Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Even the song Feed the Birds became a favorite of Walt Disney himself. He was said to have asked to hear it played in his office every week. The impact was so big that the Oxford Dictionary even added supercalifragilisticexpialidocious to its word list. In 1968, Van Dyke starred in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. It was based on a book by Ian Fleming, the same man who created James Bond. The film was produced by Albert R. Broccoli, also known for the Bond series. Van Dyke played Caractacus Potts, an inventor and single father who creates a magical flying car. The songs, written by the same team behind Mary Poppins, gave the film its energy. Van Dyke's performance as a loving father and playful inventor helped carry the story. The cast also included Sally Ann Howes and Gert Frobe, who had played the villain Goldfinger in a Bond film. The movie was a box office hit, and the title song earned an Oscar nomination. It quickly became another family favorite. By 1969, Van Dyke decided to show a different side of himself. In the comic, directed by Carl Reiner, he played Billy Bright, a silent film star whose life goes off track. The movie wasn't light or musical. It was serious and emotional. Bright becomes successful, but is consumed by ego and addiction. The film was partly inspired by real-life silent film legends like Buster Keaton. It came out at a time when Hollywood was shifting to more realistic stories. The comic didn't make a lot of money at the time, but critics later praised it for its honest look at fame and failure. It also proved that Van Dyke could handle dramatic roles just as well as comedy. Dick Van Dyke went through one of the darkest periods of his life in the early 1970s. His battle with alcohol addiction got worse over 7 years. By 1972, he was so broken that he checked himself into a rehab hospital for 3 weeks. He said he felt suicidal. The drinking had started as a way to ease his nerves in social situations, but it turned into something much more dangerous. He compared the grip of alcohol to that of heroin. During rehab, he went through painful withdrawal in the psych ward and faced the truth that he was truly addicted. That moment changed him. After several slips, something finally clicked. One day, he got so nauseated from the thought of alcohol that he completely lost the desire. He hasn't had a drink since. Now in his late 90s, he credits staying sober and staying fit as the two biggest reasons for his long life. But while he was fighting addiction, his marriage was also falling apart. He and his wife, Margie, had been together for over 2 decades, but distance grew between them. It got worse when he started an affair with Michelle Triola, who worked for his agent. In 1976, he admitted that the affair made things worse and that the guilt tore him apart. Both he and Margie were struggling, he with alcohol and she with prescription pills. She ended up checking into the same hospital not long after him. Though they separated, the divorce didn't happen right away. He later said, "The pain and guilt of that time forced him to grow up and be more honest." Despite everything, he and Margie stayed in touch and focused on raising their 4 children together. Their marriage, which had started in 1948, officially ended in 1984. That was after 36 years. The divorce marked a major turning point for Van Dyke. It allowed him to begin again, work on staying sober, and embrace a new chapter in his life. Margie passed away from pancreatic cancer in 2008. Even though they had been apart for years, her death hit him hard. He said it felt like he had lost part of himself. Meanwhile, his relationship with Michelle Triola lasted over 3 decades. They began living together around 1976 and stayed committed until her death in 2009. Michelle had once made headlines in a legal fight with actor Lee Marvin, but to Van Dyke, she was someone who gave him understanding during his most troubled years. They never got married, but he often said that she helped him feel grounded. When she was dying from lung cancer, he stayed by her side, singing to her in her final moments. Even though the way their relationship started was controversial, it became one of the most meaningful parts of his life. In the middle of all these personal struggles, Van Dyke made a big return to TV in a surprising way. In 1993, he took on a role very different from his usual comedy parts. He became Dr. Mark Sloan in Diagnosis Murder, a crime series that mixed mystery and family drama. His real-life son, Barry, played his on-screen son. The show nearly got canceled after just 2 seasons, but it bounced back and became a fan favorite. It ended up running for 8 seasons with 178 episodes, plus 2 movies. It even lasted longer than his famous sitcom from the 60s. The show gave him a whole new audience and kept his career alive. But just when things seemed stable, Van Dyke faced a strange medical problem that lasted for years. In the early 2000s, he started hearing a pounding noise in his head. It felt like a heartbeat and got worse whenever he tried to lie down. He saw many doctors and went through every test, but no one could explain it. By 2013, the problem was so bad that he had to cancel a major event in New York because he was too exhausted to travel. Eventually, he mentioned the problem online, and someone suggested it might be his dental implants. That turned out to be the cause. Once he fixed the issue, the noise faded. It was a strange medical mystery that haunted him for 7 years. In 1987, he faced one of the most painful moments of his life. His 13-year-old granddaughter, Jessica, came down with chickenpox. Like many kids, she was given aspirin to help with the fever. But just a few days later, she became confused, then very sick. She was rushed to the hospital, but she didn't survive. She had developed Ray's syndrome, a rare condition linked to giving aspirin to kids during viral infections. At the time, only a few thousand cases had been reported in the US, but the death rate was high. Jessica's death came just days before new research showed how dangerous aspirin could be for children. After that, Van Dyke became a national voice warning other parents. He made public service announcements to help others avoid the same tragedy. Even with heartbreak and loss, Van Dyke never slowed down. In the 1980s and 1990s, he kept popping up on TV. He starred in movies made for television, like The Country Girl with Faye Dunaway, and he even played a villain in the film Dick Tracy in 1990. He guest starred on popular shows like The Golden Girls and Matlock, showing his range from comedy to drama. He also worked with his son again in Airwolf. These appearances kept him in the spotlight and showed he could still surprise audiences. In August 2013, he was behind the wheel of his Jaguar, cruising along Route 101 near Los Angeles. He was 87. The car suddenly filled with smoke. Flames burst out from the front. A man driving by saw him slumped inside. His name was Jason Pennington. Without hesitation, he stopped, ran over, and pulled Van Dyke out. Seconds later, the whole car was in flames. The Jaguar was gone, but Van Dyke was safe. His wife posted the wreck online. The car was nothing but a burnt shell. The images went viral. It could have ended very differently. A year earlier, in 2012, he got married. He was 86. The bride, Arlene Silver, was 40. They met 6 years earlier at an award show. She was a makeup artist. People talked about the 46-year age gap. Some criticized, others were just surprised. But Van Dyke said it was one of the happiest decisions of his life. Over a decade later, they're still together. They sing, dance, laugh, and share their lives like best friends. And every time someone asks about the age difference, he just smiles and says, "It works." In June 2024, at age 98, Dick Van Dyke did something no one else had done. He became the oldest person ever to win a Daytime Emmy. He won for a guest role on Days of Our Lives. He played a mysterious man with no memory. The audience loved him, and when he got on stage to accept the award, he joked, "If I had known I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself." It was nearly 70 years since his first TV hit, and somehow he was still at the top. Not long after, he appeared in a Coldplay music video. He was almost 99. The video was filmed in his backyard in Malibu. He danced barefoot. He spoke about life, love, and death. He said he wasn't afraid. He said he felt at peace. The director, Spike Jonze, captured every moment. His voice, his family, his memories. The full version came out just before his 99th birthday. It touched millions. The way he moved, the way he spoke. It didn't feel like an old man at the end of life. It felt like someone still filled with wonder. That same year, December 2024, wildfires swept through Malibu. Winds reached 90 miles an hour. The fire was fast. Van Dyke tried to stop it with a pool hose. He was on the ground, crawling. The hose got tangled. He collapsed. He was almost 99 and in real danger. 3 neighbors saw him and carried him out. He had already lived through 4 other wildfires, but this one was different. He later said, "I wasn't prepared." Firefighters saved his house. The guest house was damaged, but he survived again, thanks to the people around him. What keeps him going isn't just luck. It's what he does every week. Even now, at 99, he works out 3 days a week, 1 hour each time. He stretches, does sit-ups, yoga, and leg presses. Sometimes even single leg presses. His friend Ted Danson once said he saw Van Dyke dancing between gym machines instead of walking. After the gym, he swims, then he naps. He says it keeps him moving. He says that's the secret to not feeling stiff or sore. He doesn't skip it. He lives by it. And he's not done yet. His 100th birthday is on December 13th, 2025. He's already planning. He says he needs more time. He has things to do. One of them is a new book. It's called 100 Rules for Living to 100. It comes out November 18th, just before his birthday. In it, he'll share what he's learned, what helped him stay happy, what kept him going. He's not looking back.